Welcome to today's webinar number 2, titled Preparing for the Interview Beyond Your Application Documents. This is our second webinar as part of the interview preparation webinar series that we are organizing as Project EduAccess in collaboration with the Rhodes Secretariat India. For those of you who were with us before, you would know that we also did an application written round preparation webinar series, similarly with the Rhodes Scholarship Secretariat in India. Very quickly, I will introduce you to who we are and to your panelists for the day, who will then take you over some of the key aspects of the preliminary interview round. And then we move to a Q&A. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we are Project EduAccess. We believe that access to higher education, leadership, and professional opportunities is a privilege that most people from marginalized communities are systematically denied through cost, information, and dispositional barriers. And we try to improve inclusivity in these spaces by removing some of these barriers. Our collaboration with Rhodes Secretariat India and our public workshops are a part of our aim to make information more accessible. So to do that, we have three wonderful panelists. We have with us Daksh, who you would have, you might remember from our webinar yesterday. Daksh is doing an MPhil DPhil in economics and is a Rhodes Scholar from 2023. We have with us Ritika, who's currently doing a DPhil in neuroscience and is a Rhodes Scholar from 2022. And we have with us Kirtana, who is doing a DPhil in the subject is not written, but I'll let you know, and is also a Rhodes Scholar from 2023. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining us today. And Ritika, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Ma. Hi, everyone. So I'll quickly take you over what is expected in the preliminary interview round. So usually we call this the technical interview round, where the assessors, the interviewers want to figure out that you really know all the academic stuff that you're talking about, and whether you are really the person you claim to be on your documents. It's usually 15 to 20, sometimes 25 maybe minutes long. So if you have 2 or 3 people or even 4 people on the panel, then you will have them asking you different questions. Sometimes one person may ask you more questions than the others, but everyone will have a different line of questioning, sometimes a different technique or a different style of questioning. Now, it is not compulsory that all the people on the panel, all the interviewers will be from your particular field of expertise. They could be from different fields, especially if your area of study is a little bit unconventional. But the interview is about your academic interests. So whatever you discuss, try to make sure that both an academic as well, both a specialized as well as a not so specialized audience can understand the gist of what you're trying to convey. And most of the questions in the interview will revolve around your academic and personal statement, your CV or resume that you submit, with a slightly higher focus on the academic statement and the work that you've done before. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so since it's a little bit technical focused, expect questions about your area of academic expertise, and you may be asked very pointed questions or very abstract questions. There is really no one way that this interview could go. But if you are asked a complex question, then like I said before, try to be able to convey it in a manner that both maybe your grandma or your really young sibling can understand it, as well as your professor, so that they can appreciate the depth and breadth of your knowledge while also getting a broad sense of what you're talking about. Now, you don't need to, go through the whole textbook of your area of expertise so that you remember all the facts, all the figures during that about all the things you studied in your undergraduate and graduate degree. But at least be a little aware of the main topics in the area of interest that you have highlighted in your statements. And if possible, also the recent advances in that particular question, in that particular field, especially if you're from a STEM or a current humanities sort of background. If you're applying for research degrees and you said that you're interested in a particular research question or a particular topic that you want to explore and work on at Oxford, then the questions might mostly be around that as well. People may try to ask you to explain technical concepts and see if you have read the recent paper that came out around that. So don't panic if you don't know the answer to that, but try to get a little bit of awareness about what's going on in the field before you go into the interview. Um, like I said, try to think of the broader implications of your research or field and how it contributes to societal betterment. And this is in keeping with the Rhodes uh, layout of yourself, others, and the world. So see how all the stuff, even if your research area or your area of interest is really niche, it fits somewhere in the bigger picture. Try to be able to map that out for your interviewers. And it always helps to figure out what kind of impact, potential impact your work could have, say, in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15, or even 35 years, whatever, and try to explain it in that way.
Thanks, Ritika. So this is, I mean, philosophical ideas doesn't mean that you need to have, first of all, to clarify very simply, ever have read philosophy. It's not that you need to start reading Plato and Aristotle or, God forbid, Schopenhauer 2 weeks before your interview. It's just about generally being aware of like certain ideas about things like ethics, equality, general principles of social justice. And really the idea here is to see how you think, right? Your framework of thinking about things, about issues, is what they're trying to analyze. And to understand that, they will often use questions about current affairs and philosophical ideas, right? So it will be something, and again, this varies a lot. If you're in a field like law or economics, you're very likely to face questions like these. If you're trying to apply for a DPhil in, say, well, immunology, there is a lesser chance that you'll face questions like these. Even if you do, it'll be less important in your interview compared to your technical questions, right? At least in this round. So if you face a question like this, the idea is to one, see, are you aware about things that are happening? So it's a good idea to have generally looked at the news in the past, like couple of months. Doesn't mean that you need to do the UPSC kind of preparation where you know every single thing about current affairs, right? These are like headline news about things like policy, about national affairs, about different matters, which particularly may be related to your field. For example, if you're in economics, questions about equality, income distribution, employment, uh, right, sectoral transformation. So these kinds of like, or say the analysis of the budget, these are things that you can face. If you're in law, the focus might be something different. For example, they might ask you about the IT bill that was recently struck down and certain policies like that, right? So it's just about being aware of how your field relates to the country at large and to the world at large and issues relating to that. And again, you don't need to display a lot of technical understanding. You don't need to cite, say, if you're in law, you don't need to cite ICJ judgments or Supreme Court judgments when you're talking about it. It's just to analyze your framework of thinking. So within that, try to, whenever you're answering a question like that, it's your opinion, obviously, but also try to bring out certain ideas within that answer, right? So, for example, if someone asks you about, say, something like corporate social responsibility, when you're answering that, it will inevitably involve things like, okay, what is the role of a corporation in the country? What ethics are underlying it? What moral obligations do they have to do something like this? whether it makes sense from an equality perspective. So these are just like answers. So it's a topic, but within your response to that topic, you bring in philosophical ideas, and that's as much philosophy you'll ever need. You don't ever in any of these questions need to cite specific things. Obviously, if you're from a discipline where this relates, so for example, if you're from a philosophy background and they ask you a question about philosophy, it's ideal if you do also involve some of your readings. But if you're not from that background, you're only expected to be aware, to be a conscientious citizen about of the world, um, and to generally engage with these ideas. And the most crucial thing is again, be frank about how you're responding to these questions, because it's a lot of them trying to figure out your modes of thinking, your framework of thinking, and how you approach challenges in the world. And so it's best to try and put your best and most honest truth forward. And if you face any contentious issues, so sometimes questions can be controversial. So try to deal with them in a polite manner, in a respectful manner. Don't be too confrontational. At the same time, express your opinion and your belief fairly truthfully, and you don't have to budge if someone challenges you. Even if you're having a debate with the panelists, be respectful of their opinions, but don't treat their pushback against an idea of yours as an immediate reason for you to switch and say, oh, okay, okay, I was wrong. Because a lot of times that pushback is also to see how steadfast you are in your belief, right? Is it something that you just came up with, or do you actually believe in that thing? Are you actually able to defend that position against counter argument? So be respectful, but don't like immediately think that any sort of pushback is an indication for you to just flip. Uh, and yeah, again, with contentious issues, sometimes they can just be controversial generally, but there are also cases where they may bring up issues which may be personal and close to you for a variety of different reasons, right? And in those cases, again, it's understandable to have a strong emotional reaction, but try to keep the discussion as uh, like general as possible. And you can bring in your own personal experience, but when they do the pushback, if you can avoid thinking that they're trying to particularly target you, it helps. Even though sometimes it can feel a little triggering or it can feel a little confrontational, treat it as them trying to understand where your position comes from. And once you do that, then your response would flow naturally. Can we go to the next slide, Musta? Thanks. Yeah. And related to that, I mean, you've already done this in a way, right? Your statement of purpose is your personal narrative. You've put down that narrative over multiple iterations of drafting your personal statement. It's the most coherent narrative you'll ever put out because of how much you've thought about it. An interview will probably have a less coherent narrative. But what is important is that the story that you tell of your own life, of yourself, is consistent with what you've written down on paper. And that's what they want to test. And in that, which is why if you've attended yesterday's interview, uh, at some point, sorry, not yesterday's interview, yesterday's webinar, at some point, Samir talked about the idea of your motivation to study something not just coming from personal curiosity, which is also fine, but for a reason that relates to the world, right? How does what you want to study relate to your personal experiences, to your beliefs about the world? Say, for example, you think that, I don't know, treating cancer is one of the most crucial things in the world right now. And so that's why you want to study treating cancer. Or, for example, if you think that legal discrimination in housing markets is a big issue, and so you want to research that, or you want to study an MPhil in law. The idea is that whatever your intended course of study is, and whatever your intended research question is, if you're doing a research degree like a DPhil, why have you chosen that question? You know the answer best to that. You know why you've picked it out. And so flesh out that motivation. Really think hard about what courses you're applying for and why you're applying for them, right? What are the experiences in your life, or what are the beliefs in your life that have led you to picking that course? It could be it could very simply be something you've read. For some people, it might be personal experiences. For some people, it might be something they saw in the news. For some people, it might be some coursework that they had taken, and that really shaped their beliefs and taught them to think in a particular way, which has led them to want to pursue this course, right? So it's very different. There's no fixed answer for it. but just try to investigate deeply all of these whys. So why you're trying to study a particular course, why do you want to study at Oxford particularly? Within Oxford, why the Rhodes Scholarship? Why not something else? I mean, Oxford has, I don't even know how many scholarships, but it's probably more than 15 to 20 different scholarships. Uh, but yeah, so why do you want the Rhodes Scholarship particularly? And in your life, all the clubs you've been a part of in college or internships you've done or worked, maybe you've done work with some non-profits. Why did you pick those and why did you want to do those? It's also okay to just say that you wanted experience, right? Not every single experience in your life is going to be some deeply motivated, important thing. But I'm sure a few of them will be. A few of them will have strong motivations and beliefs that led you to pursue that particular path. So think about that. Uh, and yeah, just prepare questions about that because a lot of the interview will focus on why you did certain actions in the past or why you're trying to study a particular course, because through that they're trying to gauge your beliefs and your personality, because that will tell them about your motivation. um, and on a similar note, they might ask you about what you want to do in the future. It also relates to these motivations only. Like given these motivations, if your motivation is, for example, solving inequality, then if your 5 year plan is becoming an investment banker, there is like a slight dissonance, a very major dissonance in that plan, right? So it's just about, does your long term aspiration or goal sort of align with these motivations that you're talking about? You don't have to do it. It's not like they're going to make you sign a bond paper and then in 5 years later, you're not working in a non-profit and working in an investment bank. They're going to come for you. It's just, again, a way of for them to measure where your beliefs lie. Yeah. Um, Next slide. Okay. Similarly, if you have mentioned any extracurricular activities, it's helpful because it just shows you being a rounded person who does a lot of things. It's generally not necessary. So first, like the first like caveat I will give for all of this is, if you haven't done extracurriculars and if you meet people who have done extracurriculars, it's not like you cannot be selected. I had not done extracurriculars in college, still ended up being selected. I did think I wouldn't be because of that exact reason. So that's why I want to tell you, not having done them is not a death knell. You will have plenty of opportunity to show that you're a rounded person, and that can just come from your interests. Obviously, if you've done co-curricular, extracurricular activities, it really helps to show that you're a rounded individual who has a lot of different interests. Your interests are not just in academics, you're also interested in other goals. Like, for example, these things are also very important in learning different skills. Like sports can often teach you leadership skills. Things like performing arts have massive effects on how much confidence you carry into your life in other fields. So these things also help generally in just showing your personality overall. When you talk about them, it's important to note why you did a certain extracurricular activity. For example, if you taught kids during your college years as a part of one of the clubs, why you picked that over, say, another club? What was the motivation why you wanted to go towards that? And obviously, in that case, you can obviously give like a social justice motivation. But even if you don't have something like that, for example, if you were part of the dance society, it can mean that, okay, you wanted to express yourself. You really like dancing as a mode of expression, as a way to let yourself out there without inhibitions, and that can be your motivation. The idea is that whatever activity you did had a certain reason you did that, unless you were just doing it without any motivation at all and did not enjoy it, in which case you should have probably left it. But if you've done something out of academics, because academics is necessary, outside of that, you do what you really want to do and what you enjoy. And so they want to know that these activities you did, what was that enjoyment you got out of them, which led you to pursue them. And obviously, you can also use these as an example of things that have motivated you for whatever you want to do. In some cases, for example, people could have done performing arts, which led them to maybe pursue a particular field later, right? Maybe say you were part of the dance club, you traveled, saw different cultures, and now you want to do sociological research. It's just an example. But the point is that all of these experiences have an impact on your personality. And so, what they want to know is, one, why you did them, what you got out of them, and how that has shaped you as a person. And so, use your extracurricular activities to bring that out. This can include literally anything. It can be clubs, hobbies, sports, hobbies don't have to necessarily be like professionally pursued, right? It doesn't have to be that you either need to be part of a club where you pursued it or at least have an Instagram page, because otherwise we won't accept it. Even if you just pursued a hobby in your private life, that's good enough and you can talk about it. Yeah. Mrs. Pa, can you do the next slide? Okay, so now it's just some general tips. First, I'll give some very basic ones, and then Ritika will take you through the more useful ones. Uh, so the first thing is just, and this is something I had done, is to go through your documents and try and analyze them from a neutral perspective. And this relates to different questions in the past, right? Uh, when you're looking at your CV, there'll be so many things there. If a third person is looking at it and trying to gauge, okay, who is this person, and trying to understand you from those documents, what are the questions they would ask? Okay, so why did you, for example, if you have worked at Teach for India, why did you work at Teach for India? What did you learn? These are questions you can make a note of. So what I had done was printed out my CV and my personal statement, gone through like every paragraph or everything in the CV and written questions down with that, and then eventually use those questions to think through the documents and prepare answers. Not literally like prepare answers by speaking. What I did was just think through those questions. So I know what my response in general to a question like that would be. Uh, so that is one thing that I found really useful. Obviously, you can also get a friend to do this. So they can be the third person who looks through your documents, thinks of questions, and asks you those questions. So that's also perfectly fine. One other really important thing is don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's important to just treat it as a conversation about who you are. They just want to learn about you. They want to know who you are as a person. What do you believe in? What do you want to do? It's really telling another person your life story in a sense. And using that approach is also very helpful because a lot of times in these interviews, people underperform their abilities. For example, I really think that there were people who were probably more qualified than me, who probably should have gotten it, whose interviews didn't go as well because they were very anxious about it. And the one thing that I did was put very little pressure on myself. I had like no expectation from the interview. I treated it as a conversation. And even after the interview was done, I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and nothing's going to change now. So the point is that the lesser pressure you put on this like one thing, because when you heap too much pressure on like one 15-minute interview, then you're going to inevitably be too anxious about it. If you're thinking, oh my god, this can change my life, this 15 minutes, if I nail it, it'll change my life, you're going to be too stressed to put your best foot forward. And so try to reduce the pressure on yourself. Try to be as calm as possible. People have different techniques. If you want to meditate, do yoga, walk, particularly like in the online interview, all of this is possible. If you have an offline interview, then it's a different conversation. But yeah, try to like just calm yourself down before the interview, and then you can panic after it. That's completely fine. No one can see you then. But before the interview, I'll be as calm as you can, and that will really, really help you maximize your ability to put your best self forward. Um, Apart from that, if you say something wrongly, I think I said I, I messed up one of the definitions and said like a wrong answer. It's generally completely fine. In most cases, if you say so, if you don't know something, and this is related to what Ritika also said earlier, right? If you face a very complicated question, first you can ask for clarification if you can't understand. Don't try to jump into an answer when you don't know like two of the terms because you're too afraid to ask. Because well, you have no idea what you're talking about. So it's important to get those clarifications when you need them. And additionally, if you don't know an answer, it's completely okay to say, I don't think I know this answer. Sometimes they'll either like move on from it, or what they sometimes do is if you're not able to remember something, they'll try to give you hints and pointers about what it is. And it can sometimes help you recall the answer and you can say the answer. That happened with me where I wasn't able to recall something, started the answer wrongly. And then one of the panelists just pointed me in the right direction and then I was able to get the answer. So it's completely okay to ask for help and ask for clarifications, and also completely okay to get an answer wrong. It's not like, oh, I got one answer wrong and now I'm doomed. And yeah, the last thing is just that stand your ground where you can. As I said earlier, when they push back, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that they think that you're completely wrong and what you're saying makes no sense. It means that they want to know why you are saying. And you should give justification for it. You should acknowledge their counter arguments still, but don't treat a pushback as a reason for thinking that, oh, well, they hate what I said and now I have no chance. No, it's just their way of saying that, okay, you can get opinions very easily, right? Opinions sell dime a dozen on the internet these days. Do you know why you believe something? And can you justify and stand by it? That's the question that they want to answer. And that's what they want to know. And yeah, that's, I think, it from me. Ritika, do you want to take over?
Thank you, Daksh. I think that covered a lot of ground and went through a lot of things that even I had in my mind when I was at this stage of the applications. So, like Daksh said, this is a conversation about you, emphasis on conversation. It's like any other chat, really. And I really like the line about you'll go home or you'll get out of the call and nothing will change. Having that mindset is really nice, it'll help you relax. And since it's a conversation about you and you know yourself the best, you really have the upper hand. So chill. Um, well, the second thing I'd say is the interview may or may not start with them asking you to introduce yourself. Some interviewers just jump right into the questions. Some might ask you to tell us about yourself briefly. So it is useful to prepare a short and simple 1 or 2 sentence introduction if you are in that position. And that you can really use to guide the discussion. So the kinds of adjectives you use in that small introduction can lay the basis for follow-up questions. So think about it, but don't expect it. It may or may not be put to you as the first question. Then again, remember that what answers you give also form the basis of subsequent questions. So it might be a good idea to list out a few keywords according to the general themes and academic themes in your statements, in your documents, that you definitely don't want to miss when you answer questions related to those themes. The way I did it was similar kind of to what Daksh did by printing out things and writing questions and answers or thinking about them. What I did was I made a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, split up my whole CV and academic statement into different bits, some based on themes, some based on how it affected me or why I did it, and then wrote down a few keywords that I would use in constructing my answers when needed. Like you can tell, this is a very short interview. 15-20 minutes is really not that much. You'll get in, you'll answer a few questions, and then you won't even know when it's over. So make sure your answers are concise and organized. Now, this is a personal decision, but some people think that mock interviews help in organizing your thoughts, in making your answers to the point. Some people don't need them, some people don't want to do them. It's totally up to you. But personally speaking, mock interviews were very useful for me. I did it with one of my parents, one of my professors, and I did multiple rounds, different kinds of questions, and it also made me more confident in my ability to verbally convey my thoughts, because a lot of things made sense in my head, but only if I said them aloud to another person did I really understand if it made sense to them. If you are asked a question and you are, for any reason, feeling a little bit overwhelmed or need a few seconds to collect your thoughts, make sure that you're feeling centered and relaxed, ask for a few seconds. Say that, can I have a minute? Take a deep breath and then answer. It's totally fine to be balanced, to be relaxed before you share your thoughts with them. Again, like Daksh said, if you don't know the absolute or factual answer to a question, then it's okay. Just say, I don't know the exact answer. Instead, you can use that as an opportunity to discuss your thought process, because they really want to see how you think. So, for example, if you're applying for a PhD or some sort of degree in biochemistry, and you're asked to, I don't think you'll be asked this, but you are asked to talk about the fifth step of the Krebs cycle, something as random as that, and it just doesn't come to you, because really, who memorizes the Krebs cycle? You can just say that, yeah, it's probably to do with the oxidation of blah blah blah, and the output product could be like this, or or you could just say that no one really needs to memorize that. That's what we have textbooks for. Just either inject some humor into the conversation, or tell them how you'd go about finding the answer to the question. It's fine to not know facts. Basic ones, fine, you will know them if you've reached this far, but you don't need to know everything. So don't burden yourself with memorizing all your textbooks before the interview. And most of all, just relax, drink some water, and smile. Enjoy this whole opportunity to chat with a group of really amazing, really cool people. And if you found that you have someone really inspiring or exciting on the panel, and you just want to quickly ask them a question before your interview ends, just go ahead and do it. It's a conversation in the end between a few humans, and give them a chance to remember you. Try to, if that's another thing you get, if you keep your answers short, more people can ask you questions and have a more personal impression of you. So use that opportunity. And that's it from me. Yep. Another quick tip is that your informal best friend is actually the alternative guide for the preliminary interviews. This will be sent to you if it already hasn't been. It's a big-ish document with a lot of different scenarios past scholars have been in, a lot of tips on preparing, a lot of frequently asked questions, and it has a lot of wisdom from years and years of Rhodes scholars from India, from their first interview rounds. So read this very thoroughly, familiarize yourself with it, maybe read it a few different times after a few mock interviews, or after you have thought through all the nitty-gritties of your application documents, and you'll be good.
Great. Sorry. Thank you so much, Ritika and Daksh. That was really comprehensive and I'm sure extremely helpful. So we now move to the Q&A part of the session. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you to unmute and ask the question to the speakers, or you can put your questions in chat or send it as a DM to either me or any one of the speakers. Oh, so there's actually quite a few questions in chat. Okay, if someone made a mistake in the CV, let's say mentioning courses that they did and that doesn't match with the academic statement, so how do we handle that if they ask why there's a mismatch?
I think that would depend on the nature of the mismatch. If it's just in writing the name of the course, but the subject matter is kind of similar, you can just be honest about it overall. But if it's something that can be justified as a small mistake in logistics and in typing, then it's fine. Acknowledge it. That's what I think.
I'm slightly confused. Like courses, as in courses taken within a degree, or like a full degree itself? Because if it's courses within a degree, I doubt it should matter too much. Um, unless it's a course that is required for the Oxford entrance. So certain programs require you to have taken specific coursework, but like as long as that's not affected, I doubt it should matter too much, like just one course in the degree. But if it's like a bigger thing, then yeah, so it's really dependent on what exactly is different.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a question with respect to the technical part of the interview. In case we're choosing a major which is not directly related to our educational background, will they take that into consideration? Specifically, I come from a STEM background, but I plan to pursue a master's in public policy. Hence, I might not know how to analyze policies in depth. So I'm not sure how to prepare for the technical round.
I could go first on that. Don't worry. They won't expect you to be an expert on something you haven't studied before. But something that you will have to prepare well for in this situation is talking about why you want to study the MPP if you come from a STEM background. It has to be really clear and convincing what your motivations are and what you want to get out of the MPP, why the MPP at Oxford, maybe even questions like why not a similar public policy course somewhere else, what made you switch, those kinds of things. Maybe being aware of a few of the themes that are taught in the MPP. What are the coursework titles? What are the kinds of readings you have to do will help you. So you can say that I'm excited to study about this, which is taught in the MPP. So that way you can do a little bit of research. You don't have to go very in depth, but you'll at least be familiar with the course, the subject matter of the particular course that you want to study, and link that back. So connect the dots between why you want to do it and what you have done before. So as long as that story is coherent and makes sense, I think you should be okay in this situation. But be aware, well aware of why you want to go into the MPP in Oxford, and add a little bit of why as a Rhodes Scholar if you're asked.
Dax, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that the MPP is one course that people from so many different backgrounds do. That yeah, as long as you can justify having a policy interest or wanting to work in policy, your background can be, so for example, if you've worked in healthcare before, then you want to maybe do health policy. So yeah, don't worry too much about not having like a MPP related background. It's a course that is literally for anyone who wants to do policy work.
Yeah. I just want to add though that um yeah, so even though you've mentioned you want to do like public policy, I'm not sure which panel they'd put you in, whether that'll be social sciences or whether that'll be STEM. But if there is a chance you get put in a STEM panel, so be prepared for questions. Sorry. Sorry. Excuse me. Um, okay, so Kirtana is here. I'm just gonna. Hi, Kirtana. So we're just starting the Q&A.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I got the timings mixed up.
No, that's fine. So there is a question on, actually there's two questions on just how to introduce yourself. So if there's a question on tell us about yourselves, like what are your recommendations for like what all you can include and just how does one navigate that? Or if you have any like tips for it.
So for my interview, I think my preliminary interview was very, very technical. So I didn't really go into any of the anything personal at all. So I probably am not the person who can answer this best.
Yeah, Ritika, Daksh.
Daksh, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think in terms of how you introduce yourself, I mean, obviously just give background about what you're doing. So what courses you're doing, or if you're working somewhere, just give a background about that. Tell them where you're from. Mostly in my experience, they don't really ask you to do that because they've already gone through your documents. So they know the basics. And given they have like severe time constraint, in my experience, they didn't ask anyone to introduce themselves. It was just about, we know who you are, the basics. Next time to dive into the deep end. But at the same time, if you just want to prepare a two-liner, just add like the course that you're doing, where you're from, and I think that should suffice.
Yeah, so I was asked, but yeah, it depends really on time, and also the interviewers are talking to so many people that maybe that's just an opportunity for them to take a breather and let people talk before they really rewire and talk to another person. So yeah, like Doug said, I said something like my name, which year of my undergrad degree or whatever degree I was doing at the moment, and a few things to describe the other things I do. So if you are the head of some organization, say that, or if you're a dancer, singer, whatever extracurricular adjective you want to add to that, say that. And you could just add a plug-in on what you want to do at Oxford. There's no template, can be as short or as long as you like it to be. But keep it short because it's just 15 minutes in all.
Yeah, I feel like this is a like a STEM versus like humanities, social sciences thing where I feel like maybe STEM students do get asked, but again, like irrespective of which discipline you're from, I think it's better to prepare just in case they ask you. Sometimes it's also a way for them to figure out what to pick and start asking because what you say as as part of your introduction is probably the things that you think are very important to you, and so um they'd probably pick on that, said, oh, so you mentioned this, and then that's how the conversation starts. So my suggestion would be that make it like very brief. Of course, they have all of the documents, so if you want to just take a few lines, like one or two lines, to just do that basic, I'm studying this and I want to do this, and then like if there's something that within those academic like disciplines, if there's a niche that you are interested in, you can mention that, or if there's like an activity or something else that you're passionate about, mention that. Again, just think about like if they were to like what are the first like 3 4 things that you want a person to know about you, and are you okay then taking questions that may be more technical on those things. um that would be my suggestion. Okay, lots of questions in chat. What to do with hand gestures? I saw some question. Like how far is it advisable to use them in the interview? Anyone?
If you use your hands a lot to explain things normally, then I guess you can use your hands.
Yeah, this actually was a problem with me as well because I move my hands a lot, and so I had to like just keep my hands under my legs when I did my interview because I felt like they were getting quite distracting. Like when I speak, I do this quite a lot. So I had to like keep my hands in, but I don't think it'll be a problem if whatever comes naturally to you. Don't at the cost of worrying about your hand gestures, you shouldn't take your mind away from the content. So whatever comes naturally to you, just do that. It's completely fine. Okay. What if you spoke of a program in your application that is now discontinued?
Talk about what else you would do. It's fine. You can't do anything about it. Like if it's a program, and talk about why you wanted to do that program in the first place if you're asked, and then use that to link to what else you do now that that one has been discontinued. If there is really nothing that's similar, then maybe you'd have to focus on the people who were teaching the program that was being discontinued and what else they teach. If it's a research based thing, then the professors who did that program or administered that program, what else are they part of? And really depends on the program and what your interests are. But yeah, you'd have to, do some extra homework to cover that bit, I think.
Yeah, as Atika said. Okay.
Mispa, there's like a lot of questions about how technical the interview got when it was technical. Should I say something about this, or was this covered?
We did cover it, but of course, like, would be good to get your insights as well.
So for me, it was very like, so they started off, they asked me to present my research that I had done in my undergrad. Then they asked me a lot of questions about methodology, statistics that I used, background reading about my topic, a lot of if I understood the problem I was tackling, like very very technical details about my project, and not much about like me personally, like did you learn this from the project, that, like nothing like that. And then they asked me a lot of like medical school questions, like what did you learn in med school, like tell us what you would do in this situation if a patient had this problem or something like that. And none of my panelists were from my, because I saw a question about that as well, none of my panelists were from my area of interest, which was immunology. Like I had panelists who were doing other fields of medical human work, but not immunology. And so they didn't ask me too many questions about my particular field because it wasn't their field. They asked some questions about, do I know how good my field is in India? Like, do I know what kind of work is going on in my field in India? And I think when you get your preliminary interview panel, you should look into the panelists a little bit just to see, like, you don't need to read up their work and stuff like that, but just to know what fields they are in so that you can go as deep or not go as deep into your field depending on whether they are in the same field as you. And also I think there are two panels for biology and medical sciences, like separately. Like if you were doing fields like immunology or neuroscience and very medical fields, then you had a different biomed panel. I'm not sure because I remember someone else from another country saying that they had a different group of people talking to them if they did like plant sciences and stuff like that, but I'm not at all sure about this. But yeah, that was how my preliminary interview went. Like it was completely technical.
Yeah, there was another question on just interdisciplinary work within like STEM courses. So in that case, how technical or specific could they expect the questions to be? So yeah, Ritika, Keetana, both of you.
Which can you tell me the question again?
Yeah, so it's so basically about interdisciplinary work, and so how specific can one expect the questions to be in case that they're doing interdisciplinary work?
I see. Sorry. So, if you have written about a particular project in your statement saying that in my undergrad or master's, whatever, I worked on a thesis titled X, it could be interdisciplinary, it couldn't be, whatever it is, you can be asked specific questions about that. So if you have written about the hypothesis, if you've mentioned some results, or if even if you have given links to publications in your CV, you can be asked questions about that in depth. Or it could be anything else. It could even, your questions might even deal with how did you talk to the people, different interdisciplinary backgrounds, how did you manage that as a research administrator's point of view if you were leading on that project. Because unlike Kirtana's interview, and I'm not from a medicine background, I'm from a basic sciences background, I really didn't get very technical questions. My questions were more to do with, so I study sleep, and my panelists, there were a few mental health professionals, and the rest were architects. I had one architect, one mental health professional, and one economist, which seems like a kind of strange mix, but all of them had worked on sleep and city planning sort of things before. So in my answers, the panel here is very interdisciplinary, and my work was very basic sciences. But my answers had to be, I tailored my answers to what they wanted. Were asking me, for example, I was saying things like studying sleep today might end up in 10 years affecting policy that makes cities planning more equal, where people from different socioeconomic backgrounds have equal opportunities to the ideal environments in which they can rest, and so on. So you've got to be creative when you have questions that are not very direct, even especially if you have done interdisciplinary projects or if your panelists are interdisciplinary. So while you should be well versed with the specific research questions you've done in your STEM training, you should also be open-minded and creative about the answers you give when you are questioned in a slightly different manner about those research questions that you worked on. I hope that answered the question.
Great. So there's another question. So does it matter if you mentioned about an ongoing project in your CV of which you were expecting a certain path, but due to certain circumstances, it's diverging from the path, or is it undergoing or it's going extremely slow? And so you aren't getting the things that you mentioned in your CV you would be getting out of the project. How do you navigate that?
That's just science. If you're talking about science, that's just the nature of research or life in general. So it's okay. Be open and honest about it, and talk about why it isn't going the way you think it should, and what you're doing to mitigate those circumstances. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. I think. Okay. So again, any tips on how to navigate, how to advocate from being from a theoretical background and research? Like, how do you advocate how a particular mathematical equation solves a false problem? Um, how do you, again, I guess the question more broadly is how do you make your technical academic work seem like it's going to solve some global pressing issue? Anyone or all of you?
I feel like I'm talking too much, but it doesn't have to solve an issue right now. Again, be creative. If your what you're studying is really niche, again, I'll give my personal example. I study sleep, very basic neuroscience of sleep and hibernation in a very specific species of animals. What this can tell us, it's very exploratory. But since it's exploratory and very niche, it can tell us 100 different things that could lead to a chain of some more discoveries, that could lead to a chain of some more discoveries, and maybe take humans to space, something like that. So it's on you to figure out the possibilities and lay them out. If you think you're being too futuristic, or saying something that's too far-fetched, that's what you think, but it could just be possible. Most of the research that was done in the past was done in this way, which led to the modern discovery, which led to laying the foundations of modern science and the laws of nature and so on. So don't judge yourself from the very beginning. Like I've been saying probably too many times, be creative with what you believe in, and believe in it. And as long as you are passionate about it, as long as you believe in the possibilities, as long as you think and can demonstrate that your work can lead to long-term impact, you just need to show that, and the panelists will be convinced.
Keertana, yeah.
I saw a message talking about how, like, if they have to present data and stuff, and I can't very clearly remember, but I feel like they did ask me if I had a presentation ready, and I think I told them that I don't have one, and so that I would do it orally, or I showed them a presentation. I'm not very, very sure, but they definitely did ask if I wanted to present slides. And I think if you have a slide deck ready of your previous project, then I would just have it ready just in case they ask you about it.
That's really helpful, Keertana. Um, I think those are all of the questions. I mean, we've answered most of the question in some way or the other, if not very directly. If there's any other question that you want to ask, or you feel if your question hasn't been asked, then please put your question in chat again. I see a raised hand. Akash, please.
Right. I just wanted to check about tomorrow's session. It says drop-in clinic, and I just wondered how it would be different from today's and yesterday's session. Not tomorrow's, day after tomorrow's session, that is.
Yeah, so that's just a question and answer session. So we won't have a presentation or anything. It's just a drop-in. So if anyone wants to come with their last minute queries, we'll be there to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Uh, yeah, I think that's about it. Again, if there's any other questions, please feel free to put them in chat again or send it as a DM. One thing I just want to sort of reiterate, all four of us, Vritika, Daksh, Kirtana, and I were all speaking in our personal capacity. So, and from what we experienced as, people who went through the whole interview process. So we are only saying what we can gauge from, seeing that happen to us and then, to others, but we aren't speaking on behalf of the Rhodes Secretariat India, or we can't really say for sure anything that happens in the interview. So please do take our sort of experience and as whatever we said with a pinch of salt, we may be wrong as well. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that because everyone has a different experience, and and sometimes things just may be very different, and it really is on the panelists and how they take the interview forward. And every year there's a different panel, I think, or people. So, yeah.
I just want to add to that just one more thing before we leave. While the questions in the technical round can be really specific from the very specific things you've mentioned in your statements, they can also be really broad. So you will know most of the details of your work that you have done, but the extra stuff like what can it be in the future can catch you off guard if you are too focused before the interview. So maybe right before the interview you just want to relax and unwind, and don't keep on cramming your head with details and facts and figures just before the interview. I think that's the kind of balance that helped me prepare.
Thank you, Ritika. That's very helpful. Does anyone else, Daksh, Geeta, do you want to give any final tips or suggestions?
Yeah,
My You go ahead.
no, you can do it. My final tip is very similar to what I've already said and what Ritika said. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Relax. Go through the documents beforehand. Spend the prior 4 or 5 days stressing about it, working on it. Not only it, you have the rest of your life as well. But then on the day, try to relax yourself, put as little pressure as possible. what I did was treat it as an opportunity to also understand why am I doing this? Like, why do I want to do these things? And then, give those answers when I was asked about them. Even if you don't get through, if you get through, you'll have a little more clarity about your own life and about your own motivations, which is great. And so treat it from that perspective. And once you're out, then you can start panicking and running around. So that's it.
Mine is a little bit the opposite of what they said, and more actually brush up on all your basics, all the stuff that you like, actually look at the documents of your undergrad projects, just in case you're asked some technical questions and some things like percentages about them, and so that you just have it at your fingertips. And like, if it's been more than a year or a couple of years since you did whatever project you've mentioned in your CV or your personal statement, then definitely go back and do all of the literature reading about it, do all of the current developments reading about it, read a little bit around your field and the current developments in your field, like stuff that's in the news in the past couple of weeks or couple of months, in case you haven't been keeping up with the news, in what's happening in your country and what's happening in other countries. And of course, on the day of the interview, like they said, you want to relax a little bit and not be too stressed out. But before that, I would treat it like any kind of college viva or anything like that, and actually fully properly prepare for it like you would for one of those things.
Yeah, and I just suggest all of the same things combined. Yeah, I think prepare as much would make you confident, but don't let it overwhelm you. Of course, you have other things to do as well, which is, your university, your internship, or your work, or whatever it is. So don't let all of that suffer, but at the same time, like, prepare well, I think, which is not very sound advice. But yeah, that's, I think, it. Yeah, I was just checking the chat and I don't see any other questions. So we'll end the session now exactly at the scheduled time of what we had decided. So thank you, Kirtana, Daksh, and Ritika for joining us today on a Sunday morning, afternoon. And thank you everyone who joined us today. All the best for your interview. Hope it goes really well. And we are hosting another session on Tuesday, 1st October at 1 p.m. IST. That session is a drop-in clinic, which means it's a Q&A. If you want, you can join. If you have any questions, we'll be there to help you answer them. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you all have a nice rest of your Sunday and weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you for organizing this, Misbah. Best of luck, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.